Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you're on the other side of the pond, it's 11 a.m. over here in Connecticut, where I reside. I'm nearing the end of my coffee. You can kind of see it down there. This morning I had if you've joined me before, you know I have I guess it's an Americano. I run my espresso and I just let it run. Espresso fans would have a field day with that because it's a lot of water in my coffee. But I like it. I like it. Today I had a shorter one just because this beautiful little cup is a small one. So I had a shorter coffee here. I have been tapping into, I have this coffee that I've been tapping into that a dear friend, Shri, in the DC area, who I've known forever. Shri sent me some coffee once, just as a little gift, and it's it's what's the word I'm looking for? Condensed and frozen, and it's in these little metal uh, cups, these little containers, and you just run them under hot water, and it kind of loosens up the coffee, and then you add hot water to it. So I mean, in essence, it's kind of like this, right? But it's good and it's neat. It's just like a different model. Like I had never had it before he introduced me to it. And Shri would kill me because he sent that to me. He sent me that coffee like a year ago, and I think I finally just finished it. But I like different kinds of coffee. Another one I love a French press. That just like takes a little bit of time because you have to boil your water and then you have to, put your water in the press and then press it. And I mean, it's not a lot of time, but sometimes I'm in a hurry and I like my espresso machine. So that was today. I definitely feel like energized. I'm drinking it faster today. Some days my coffee lasts until the afternoon where I'm like, it's kind of like a slow drip, where I'm just like sipping on my coffee all day. But some days, I don't know about you all, but some days I'm just like, in an hour, my cup is done. I don't know. I guess most people drink their coffee that way. Anyway, today I'm having it is a UX and coffee chat. Sometimes we just jump right into the UX and don't talk about coffee at all. Anyway, happy Friday. I'm so happy it's Friday. It's been another arduous week, let's call it. Lots of moving parts, lots of things going on, lots of irons in the fire, if you will. Um, I've been working on a number of things. If you've checked out any of my latest courses on my website, uxrcoach.com, I'm super excited for some of the new offerings. One of them, which just started this week, is a quantitative analysis and UX research course that my dear friend and colleague Melanie Stolstorff is teaching. She has a background in neuroscience and statistics, and she's teaching that course. So it's really fun because for her it's not the academic work. It's very applied, very industry. And those of us who've come from academia, we know that it's different. In industry, we move fast, and even things like statistics, we need to be able to do them quickly in industry. It's not the kind of academic environment where in academia, some projects take, some projects take years, but even a fast project in academia might take a whole semester, maybe less than that, but sample sizes are large and larger anyway than most UX research, more applied work. And there's no rush. Honestly, I think that's the deal. There's no real urgency to conducting research fast in academia. And I've got lots of academic friends. Please tell me if you disagree with this. But in academia, it's about learning the thing and being really rigorous and removing all confounds and examining things in all different ways to be really, really sure that the thing you're claiming at the end of your research study is legit. And which is why I think it's important for UX researchers to partner with academics, because in industry, we move so fast that oftentimes we have a lot of confounds in our work. Confounds are, in case you're not aware, confounds are those things that they're variables that are interfering with the thing we're measuring. And if we don't account for those variables, we may make assumptions about our data. But meanwhile, there's something else that is playing a role. An example is, let me think if I get this right. So an example would be like oh, I know. Eating ice cream leads to sunburn. And you might make this assumption because when people are eating a lot of ice cream, their chance of sunburn appears to increase. But what actually is taking place is on hot days, people are eating ice cream on hot sunny days, and it's the hot sun that's actually leading to sunburn, right? But if you're not accounting for the fact that it's a hot day and all you're looking at is the amount of ice cream intake and the amount of sunburn, you might make that inference. So that's like an obvious example, but we do this a lot in UX research where we don't account for all the confounds. We might be we might be looking at different versions of an app, different versions of a web page, and we're trying to decide which one is best and figure out, you can determine what best means. It might mean greater efficiency. People can complete their tasks or make the click or find their information faster. It could mean they understand what is taking place. It could be a comprehension thing, and that's how you're determining what is best, right? Like you could figure, or accuracy. People are able to do the thing more often than, in other versions. So you can figure out what best means, but oftentimes we will look at different versions of a website, of a product. And this is also known as A/B testing. It's version A versus version B. By the way, it could be version C, version D, version E. We still call that A/B testing. And oftentimes when we do that, we're modifying something. But meanwhile, and that's the thing of interest, but meanwhile, there's all these other variables on the screen that are also different between version A and B and C and D, where really to conduct proper research, what we should be doing is only modifying one thing. So if you want to assess the effects of some language, then everything else on the screen should be identical. The only thing you're changing is a language. And then you can assess the effects of that language change, or color, or button size, or button placement, right? But you can already see, like, even as I mentioned these things, I'm sure you can think of examples where a lot of those things are different. Maybe a button on a website is in version A up at the top and it's red and it has rounded corners and it says go. But in version B, it's orange and it's in the middle and it's bigger and it says next, right? Like people tend to modify different things, which then ultimately, when you figure out that one of these versions performs better than the other, you don't actually know why, because there are all these confounds in there. So anyway, I'm going into a little bit of detail here about confounds, and I guess I'm going into experimental design and quantitative UX research, because then we can actually, when we do these kinds of research, we can actually quantify, again, whether it's first click or accuracy or efficiency or knowledge, we can quantify these things and then we can statistically compare across different versions. One of my courses, if you're interested in what I was just discussing, one of my courses is called TPI, Testing Parts in Isolation. And I share how to actually test in this way, where you reduce all these confounds and have proper study design. The course that Melanie is teaching that just started this week, it's actually a short course, so it takes place over 5 weeks, 2 hours on, I don't remember if it's Mondays or Tuesdays. But if you still wanted to join, you can. We recorded the first session, so we actually have had a few latecomers this week. So you can still join, get the recording from the first session and jump in and learn a bit about statistics in UX research, which is, it's fun. Oh, well, it's fun for me. I don't know if everybody considers it fun, but it's another tool in your toolkit. She will be covering t-test, ANOVA, MaxDiff, conjoint analysis, and then of course the theory behind, things like confounds and the reasons why we need to have proper experimental design in our research. So if you want to join that, awesome. I have some other courses, a workshop on survey design, which let's get back to our issue at hand. So becoming a mixed methods researcher. I coach a lot of people who want to move from qualitative research to mixed methods research. And they're not sure what to do next, right? Like, how do I go from being skilled at conducting interviews, which is mostly what we're doing in qualitative research, and that's vast, right? We conduct interviews in a lot of different ways. It could be usability test, which is interview combined with being quiet and watching behavior and giving silent probes or indications that you're listening. We say things like, but we're not interrupting because we want to measure behavior. So we have this kind of research. We have lots of classic in-depth interviews where we ask people what other products they use, why they use those products, what are their favorite things or least favorite things, right? And then we show them mocked up designs and say, what do you think about these? And where would you click? And what would you expect? This kind of questioning. We have diary studies have become really popular for qualitative research. And honestly, if you wanted to grow your toolkit and move from qualitative into mixed methods, the next tool to add is surveys, right? And surveys does not necessarily mean you're a quantitative researcher. Okay, it's in the middle. So you've got qual way over here, which is we probably all understand what qualitative is. This is the interviews. It's a qualitative. It's a lot of verbalizations, and that's what we're synthesizing, and that's what we're putting together. And behavior, right? When we think about usability testing, it's verbalizations and behavior. Then as you're moving along the spectrum, where over here is quantitative. Quantitative is heavily stats. A lot of quantitative researchers aren't even talking to users verbally. They might be conducting surveys. They might be looking at the analytics, looking at behavior behind the scenes. So actually examining what pages people are clicking on, how much time they're spending on pages, what the click behavior is, where people are coming into the site from, right? There's all this data that's being collected behind the scenes that quantitative folks are versed in. Quantitative folks also tend to be well versed in statistical packages like Python and R. The middle, though, if you want to, you don't have to do all that to be a mixed methods researcher. Mixed methods is really the qualitative stuff plus surveys. Okay, and surveys are interesting to me with UX research because oftentimes UX researchers say they can conduct surveys, but then I see the kinds of questions they're putting together and they're not good. They're filled with bias, or they're double-barreled, meaning there's two concepts being measured, attempting to be measured, because it's actually impossible, but two concepts being measured in a question. Or they're leading, or the response options are not mutually exclusive. If these are things that are foreign to you and that you're interested in, come join me in a surveys course. So I have a workshop coming up, but I'm actually going to create a short course where we'll learn the concepts, the same concepts from the workshop, but then create a survey, launch a survey, analyze a survey. Because really, if you want to move into mixed methods, that's the next thing you really should be working on. It's surveys, survey questions. Number one, and it's if you're a good qualitative researcher and you understand how to ask questions that are not biased, not leading, then that's one step into writing good surveys. But it's still a skill. There's a whole field of survey methodology. There are conferences. I used to attend the APOR conference, American Association for Public Opinion Research, and others, but that's like the big one here in the States. It's a whole field. Survey methodology is a whole field. You can get a degree in survey methodology. So, for people to say like, oh, no big deal, I can conduct surveys. It really is a skill. So learn how to do surveys, how to ask questions, learn the basic concepts like, when you should use open ends and how many open ends is too many, how many questions in a survey is too many. Like learn these concepts so you don't just go out and conduct surveys and collect, potentially bad data. And then analyzing. So again, mixed method. I did mention surveys for quant. Here's the difference. Quantitative researchers who are conducting surveys will understand, they'll know how to do proper sampling. They know how to weight data. So data weighting is important because there's a lot of non-response. So quantitative researchers will understand a lot about non-response bias. So what does that mean? Well, if you're sampling, imagine a community, okay? You're sampling a community, you're conducting a survey in a community, but only a handful of people in the community respond to the survey. And now you're making assumptions about the community based on this handful of people who've responded, but you're not accounting for all the people who did not respond. So quantitative folks, survey methodologists will understand these kinds of concepts and how to account for that in the data. You don't need to do all that as a mixed methods researcher. Now, of course, knowledge is beautiful, and to continue to learn about those things and grow is amazing, and I highly recommend that. But the first thing is learning how to write the survey questions. Again, thinking about biased questions, leading questions, things like that, like learning how to really conduct great surveys, and then how to analyze them as a mixed methods researcher, not as a quantitative researcher. As a mixed methods researcher, understanding how to synthesize that data, how to display that data, how to translate that data, that's really important. And usually we're doing descriptive stats. So it's not the heavy stats that our quantitative folks are doing. It's this interim place, this mixed methods researcher place, where we can show the data in charts, in graphs. We can explain what that data means. We can show trends, maybe not statistical trends, but we can show, sometimes you don't need stats, by the way. If you show that group A versus group B interacting with, some version of a interface, that group A, of the 100 people who interacted with group A, 90% of them understand what's taking place. And in group B, of the 100 people who interacted, 10% understand what's taking place. You don't need stats to show that there is a difference, right? 10% versus 90%. But sometimes that difference is smaller, and you want to be careful to not say, let's say the difference is like 80% versus 90 or 85% versus 90%. Like in a chart, that might look like a difference, but now you're getting to a point where you want to actually see if there's a difference. And this is where some basic stats come into play. Learning how to do things like basic t-tests and ANOVAs are important for becoming that mixed methods researcher. And you don't need the intricate tools that our quantitative friends are using. There are a lot of free online tools. Even in like Excel and Google Sheets, you can do some basic stats now, which, it's getting easier and easier. These are tools at our disposal to help us do our job, more efficiently and better. So there are basic stats that you can use with free online tools to assess if there is a true difference between, 85%, 90%, whatever the differences you're looking at in your survey data. So that is my recommendation. If you want to move into mixed methods research, invest in learning how to conduct kick-ass surveys. So when somebody asks, like, you're a mixed methods researcher, what are the tools in your toolkit? Now you've got in-depth interviews, you've got usability testing, you've got journey map, you've got diary studies, you've got surveys. And not only are you skilled at creating surveys and creating descriptive stats or descriptive graphs, you also know how to do some basic statistics. That makes you a really strong candidate now for a lot of these open roles, or, even if you in your current role want to up level and get to the next level and add that tool to your toolkit. If you want to move beyond that, let's say you're super comfortable with surveys now, you want to move beyond that, starting to understand analytics is really valuable. Now, again, you don't have to be like our quant friends who are using internal tools and looking at analytics, or they're using Google Analytics and other platforms that allow us to look at what people are interacting with, how people are interacting with our products. Those are our quant friends. We consult with them when we have some really intricate analyses, even with surveys, right? We consult with our quant friends when I consult with my quant. I'm a mixed methods, solid mixed methods researcher. I bring in my quant folks when I have more intricate quant analyses that I need or that I need to ponder or figure out on my own. But I do know a little bit about analytics. So you can start to get versed in analytics. If you have your own website, I highly recommend hooking up Google Analytics. Squarespace even has some analytics. They're not as fancy. They're not as robust as Google Analytics, but you can get Google Analytics for your own website and just start to play around and look at it. You know, you can understand which of your web pages are getting more attention, more action, what people are clicking on, where people are coming in from, what search terms people are using to get to your website. There's a lot of really, really rich information there. So again, I'm not saying you're going to learn it to the extent that you're going to become a quantitative researcher, where now you're going to take those analytics and run stats on those analytics. I'm not saying that. I'm saying get well versed so you can have even conversations about analytics. So for me, again, I'm solid mixed methods. I consult with my quant friends when I need something, you know, intricate is the word I use, but you know, something super quanty. But I know a bit about analytics where I can have conversations about them. I can go to my data science partners and say, I noticed this in my qual research, in my interviews. Can you check the data to see if this persists, you know, globally or when it persists or with a certain demographic, you know, whatever it is I'm identifying in my qual research, I now have at least enough knowledge where I can go to my quant partners, the quant researcher or the data scientist, and I know what kinds of questions to ask, right? So it's a very different interaction than just throwing your hands up in the air, not knowing anything about that area at all, and just leaving it to them. Right now, you can actually have a conversation. Like, I'm noticing this in my qual. Can you examine this in the analytics? I actually, one of my favorite relationships and partnerships that I've ever had was with my data scientist, actually two. One was at Instagram and one was at Facebook when I worked on the privacy team. Those were two different partners that I had. And I loved being able to partner on what I was learning in my research and my usability studies and my qualitative work, what I was learning there, and then going back to them and saying, I noticed this, right? Like, I had a small sample, I have 10 people, but it seems like, I'm going to make something up. It seems like the older people in my very small sample, it seems like they're having trouble with this, or it seems like they're not even noticing this button. Can you go look in the in the analytics to see if this is actually a thing? Was it just like randomly something I learned qualitatively, or is this actually a thing? In one of my research projects, that relationship of being able to say, here's what I'm learning in qual, are you seeing this in the analytics? And by the way, vice versa. Data scientist says to me, I'm noticing this weird thing in the data. Have you noticed this at all in your research? And then I go back and look at my notes and like, nope, I didn't notice it, but why don't we actually focus on that in the next round of research, right? So we're constantly going back and forth, working together. Really strong team, because now I'm the one getting the why with my qualitative research. I'm out there probing and talking to people. And my data science partner is looking at the data, really digging deep, looking at this giant wealth of data to see the what, like what is actually taking place. That is a really powerful partnership. If you as a UX researcher can work together with the data scientist or the quantitative researcher. I use those interchangeably because one of the things I've noticed is, depending on the company, those are different titles. So for example, when I was at Facebook, that's the data scientist. What I'm talking to you about, the person who was looking at the analytics, looking at the behavior, that was the data scientist. When I was at Google, that was the quantitative UX researcher. So my next piece of advice, if you are interested in that kind of role, so now we're moving from mixed methods into more quant. If you're interested in that role, be sure to not only read the job posting when you're applying, but when you have those interviews, make sure you're asking what the actual job is, what the actual role is, because it is different and it could be called different things. Also, if you're interested in that role, open up your funnel. Don't just look for quantitative UX researcher. Look also for data scientist, right? And see what other there might be other titles. Just like in UX research, right? We've got design researcher, we've got qualitative researcher, we've got UX researcher, we've got user researcher, we have usability specialists. All these tend to be the same by and large, right? So just make sure you're not, if you are looking right now, that you're not, having your search terms too small. So then you won't have access to some of these other roles that are out there. Okay, so what do we talk about? Moving from qual to, I know one other thing. So once you get to creating surveys, you think you've got it. You think you're creating awesome surveys. You know how to do some descriptive stats. One thing I highly, highly recommend that is often forgotten is to test your surveys. So the same way as UX researchers, I highly recommend always doing a dry run. You always want to have that dry run. Some call it a pilot. It's not technically a pilot, but it's okay if you use that term. A pilot would be more like a larger scale, larger sample where you're actually running your study and then looking at the data. But semantics. If you're doing a dry run, no matter how many years you've been in this field, inevitably you will find something to fix. So that's why it's important to do a dry run. And if you don't, which, once in a blue moon, there's nothing to change, then that dry run participant, maybe you can actually use in your data set, or not, if it was just like a colleague or a friend or something. But we do a dry run because we want to make sure our instrument, our moderator's guide, our questions we're asking, our flow, we want to make sure everything is ready to go before we do our research with real participants, which is time consuming. It's expensive. We usually are paying people, right? We don't want to waste that data. So we do a dry run to make sure everything's ready to go. And we've got time to change it if we need to change it. The same goes for our surveys. And I see way too many UX researchers who don't test their own surveys. When you test your own survey, and I don't mean a launch, if you're using some like Qualtrics, if you're using these robust programs, launching and then looking at your data, that's more of a pilot, by the way, because it's a larger sample. But launching and then looking at your data is not testing your survey. Testing your survey means it's doing a usability test of your survey. That's what we're doing. And you can do it with a couple of people. You can do it you could do a bona fide usability test. But at least do it with a few people before using your survey as an instrument as a UX researcher. Because inevitably you'll find something like maybe you missed some introductory text. Maybe you missed the thank you message. Maybe you're missing some response options. Maybe some questions are out of order. And if you don't test it, you won't know. And the worst, you all have probably heard me say this over and over, the worst thing you could do is conduct bad research, because then you're collecting bad data and then you're making bad assumptions and bad recommendations for the product. So make sure you're testing your surveys. We are just about at time here. The time always flies so quickly with these UX and coffee chats. Thank you all for being here today. Don't hesitate to reach out if you ever have any questions. If you are working on a survey and you want to mull things over and get some feedback, let me know. If you are ready to up level, you want to move from being a qual researcher to a mixed methods, I'm here for you as a resource. I've got lots of courses. I have a retreat coming up in August that is hands-on, an intense week where no matter what level you're at, if you want to move to the next level, we will work with you one-on-one and small group coaching to get you from where you are now to the next level. So don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here to help you and help you grow in your career, help you move from junior level to senior level, help you move from qualitative to mixed methods, from mixed methods to quantitative. Don't hesitate to reach out. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And thank you so much again for sharing your time with me. See ya.